play mode.
Okay, I think we're here and ready to roll. Welcome to our 5th webinar in our winter webinar series. For those of you I haven't met, and I think I've met most of you, my name is Duncan and I'm the Executive Director for the Columbia Basin Environmental Education Network, and really excited to have you on the line here. We will have a few more people rolling in as we go, but wanted to kick off the formal introduction with a little information on the webinar. Today's webinar, as you know, is Environmental Inquiry Learning, and it is sponsored by Columbia Basin Trust, Kootenay Savings Credit Union, and the Environmental Education Provincial Specialist Association. A few tips and tricks for the webinar today. Everyone is on mute, but you can enter questions in the question and chat box. And our presenter today has said she'd be happy to receive them throughout, and then we'll have hopefully a little time at the end for questions as well. After the webinar, you will receive a very short survey. Please get back to us on that because it'll help us improve our webinars and choose topics that you'd like to see for future webinars. So as I said, this is the 5th in a series of 6 winter webinars we're hosting this winter as a pilot program, so do want to hear from you whether you think this is a valuable way of getting some professional development through the winter months. Next week we've got Alison Candy. Ali Candy runs the Groundswell Community Greenhouse, and she's going to be talking about ecology, ecological literacy, and how we can access that through food systems. So really excited to have her joining us. And this series is part of a much larger group of events that we're putting on this winter for professional development for educators. So in addition to this, we are partnering with School District 8 on the upcoming Inquiry Institute, which all of the CBEAN spots are now filled, but there may be spots available if you're a teacher in a school district in the Columbia Basin. Access that still, although I believe there's very few left, if any. But really excited to have just launched and opened registration for our community-based social marketing workshop and teaching about invasive species workshops hosted by Sue Staniforth. And Sue is an amazing environmental educator who's got over 25 years of experience in BC, and she's coming out from the Lower Mainland to share her expertise. And I believe it's the first time we've had her out in this neck of the woods, so that's really exciting. And then on the special events side of things, we've got our leadership clinic coming up, our spring celebration of environmental education. We actually just opened registration now for our Voices for Sustainability Symposium, which is taking place at gorgeous Wheeler Hut, an Alpine Club of Canada hut in Glacier National Park this September. And then our winter celebration of environmental education up the Elk Valley in Fernie. And then in addition to that, we've got our ongoing goodness, our Prody bursary program, and some of our online resources, including a new funding search engine. And last but not least, we have our Wild Voices for Kids program, so over 50 community educators with over 100 programs, and we can sponsor up to 2 programs for free in your classrooms every year. So really excited to share that with you, and please get in touch if you have questions on any of that. So without further ado, we wanted to try a couple quick questions in your chat box there. If you've been on past webinars, we've mixed it up a little bit this week, but we'll start it out with just what community do you live in? So if you could respond in your chat box, that would be great. So we've got someone from Nelson, someone from Invermere, Creston, yeah. Another one out from Nelson, and just north of Nelson. So, and I just got back from School District 8 in Nelson today, and sounds like lots going on out there. So really exciting. And what is your role in education? Just to get a sense of who's on the line here. Are you a teacher, an outdoor educator? What do you do in education? I'll give you a minute to type in your response to the question and chat box there. So it looks like we're got a mix of teachers, environmental outdoor educator. So I think learning support for teacher for HomeLinks and TOC. So that's great. So we've got a few variety here of people on the line, and so hopefully today you'll all learn something about valuable for your teaching practice and inquiry learning. So without further ado, very pleased today and to have with us Tara Wittick. Unfortunately, Barb Carrier wasn't able to join her today, but Tara and Barb were facilitators, co-facilitators for the Inquiry Institute in Invermere that took place this last fall. And so they both attended an Inquiry Institute in Alberta previously and then came here to host one in Invermere. And so Tara is a teacher in School District 6. Prior to that, she was a teacher at a few other institutions, but the first one she started her teaching practice at was very focused on inquiry and project-based learning. She is a member of the School District 6 Environmental Education leadership team, and she's incorporated inquiry into her practice in a variety of ways across several schools. So, yeah, very pleased to be able to sit next to her today here at the school district office in Invermere. So I get to pass this presentation over to her. We'll open it up, and there we go.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Is my mic on?
You're good.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to this webinar on environmental inquiry-based learning. Duncan, I appreciate the opportunity to host this session, and I want to say thanks to you and to CVEEN for developing this series of webinars to support environmental education within and beyond the Columbia Basin. I want to let everyone know this is the first webinar I've ever hosted. I'm feeling a little bit nervous, and I'd certainly appreciate your feedback after the webinar so that I can learn and grow from this experience. As you can see on the slide in front of you, I'm a teacher. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. There we go. Now you can. I'm a teacher at Windermere Elementary School, where I currently teach grade 2 to 7 French, music, drama, and literacy. Not your typical subjects that you would associate with inquiry. I think a lot of people's minds jump to science initially. But that's what I'm teaching this year and using inquiry as I go. As Duncan mentioned, I have previous teaching experience in a number of different places. I've taught for 12 years. I began my teaching experience at an inner city school, high school in Calgary, and then moved on to teach at an all-girls charter school, where I really began my, my journey into inquiry-based teaching and learning. I've also taught in Tanzania and Uganda, East Africa, and while I was overseas, I worked with children and teachers at all grade levels, from preschool to adult education, in both urban and rural settings. And then I took up teaching here in Windermere at a K-7 school, where I've taught as a homeroom classroom teacher, as well as a specialist teacher. And throughout my teaching career, I've used inquiry-based teaching and learning, and it's been increasingly rewarding as each year passes and I hone my skills as an artful teacher. I'm by no means an expert on this, but I do look forward to sharing some of what I know with you today, and I hope that you'll share your thoughts and insights and questions with me. Feel free to ask questions in your chat boxes as we go, and if I can, I'll do my best to answer them. I'd also like to just acknowledge you're taking time out of your busy lives to attend this webinar, because somehow this topic piqued your interest and your desire to know more. And I know we're all busy. I just hope this webinar ends up feeling like a valuable and worthwhile use of your precious time. On that note, I am curious to know what you're hoping to get out of this webinar. I'm wondering if you could let me know in your chat boxes. Should I be seeing it on my screen? No. Okay, there. Okay, so I'm seeing to learn more about facilitating inquiry-based learning, particularly outside. Oh, it's Natasha. Hi, Natasha.
Nashira.
Oh, sorry, it's not Natasha. Sorry, Nashira. Anybody else? Any hopes that you're really wanting to get out of this, or just generally interested?
Leave it open if you want.
Well, I'll leave that open and move on. Like I said, hopefully this is a valuable session for you, and feel free to ask questions as we go. Okay, so let's begin. Inquiry-based learning is something that we are all born with the natural capacity for. So I want you to think back about being a kid and just wanting to play with stuff, just wanting to pull it apart or put it together. Our capacity to create and learn knows no bound, and we are born with it. As stated by the National Science Foundation, humans are innately curious beings. That's what inquiry means, being curious, wanting to find things out. From birth, we behave in ways that demonstrate an intrinsic capacity for inquiry, a natural ability and desire to learn about the environment. Think about babies. Babies' worlds are full of wonder and newness. They rely on their senses as they explore the world around them. They look at faces, at lights, they put things in their mouths, they respond to sounds, and all of this so that they can gain more experience and more information. As stated on the Born to Learn website, our brains are amazing. The website says that at birth, we're born with about 350,000 generations of skills, knowledge, and talents cultivated by our ancestors. They say it's like we're born with numerous software programs, and that these programs can only be activated by us engaging with our environment, and that if we don't engage, the software will not be activated, and it will eventually disappear. So take language, for example. If a child isn't exposed to language, they simply will not learn to speak. So thankfully, most children learn a language, and as they do so, they develop language skills that allow them to build upon their foundation of this sensory-based inquiry they've started out with as infants. And quite naturally, around the same time that they learn to communicate orally, they begin asking questions. If you've ever been around a 2- or 3-year-old, they're asking about the things they see, the things they hear, what they feel, what they taste, the smell in the environment, the natural environment, the built environment, just like we all did when we were young, and hopefully that we continue to do if we're lifelong learners. I got a giggle out of this wirea. A kid firing questions at you in rapid fire succession. Children's curiosity seems insatiable. The process of learning natural and unstoppable. Just think back to your youth. Do any of these questions or images evoke that sense of youthful wonder for you? What was the one thing that you really wanted to understand how it worked? Was it trying to figure out how airplanes flew? Was there a collection of something that you're just fascinated by, that you wanted to spend hours collecting and reading about and looking at and sorting and touching? Or what was the one thing you really wanted to learn how to do, and you'd spend so much time practicing, trying new ways to improve? Like I said, we're born as natural inquirers. We've evolved to learn by looking at things from different perspectives and by making connections between things. And we do this best through hands-on, interdisciplinary, interactive, real-world play, or real-world inquiry. However, as Rachel Carson notes, a child's sense of wonder can be lost or diminished, and with it the desire to learn. I would argue that the old or on the way out or industrialized model of learning does just that for our children. I think we're experiencing that. We're living in a world full of new and ever-changing information and questions and challenges and innovations, and we can't continue practicing pedagogy and working within environments where students are disengaged and not wanting to be there at school, just feeling completely disconnected. There's hope. Inquiry-based learning and the redesigned curriculum. We have a new redesigned curriculum that's recently been placed in our laps, and I think that the BC government is trying to steer our learning towards the world that we're currently living in, a world whose future we can't predict. We don't need the same results from students that we needed post-World War I or World War II. We need to prepare students to be effective communicators, critical thinkers, and human beings who care deeply about one another and the environment in which they live. And I believe that inquiry-based learning lends itself beautifully to the redesigned curriculum and its overarching core competencies. So I guess I'm trying to say that while you're thinking about how you're going to take up that new curriculum, think about inquiry, and don't freak out. Celebrate, because we're being invited to focus on skills and processes and not so much on the content. We don't have to be the experts in the room. Have you taken the time to look at the new curriculum yet? If not, I just want to tell you a little bit about the competencies in a nutshell and how they fit with inquiry. So one of the competencies, oops, I need to go out of here for a moment and back to there, sorry. There we go, sorry. So one of the competencies is communication. And this competency encompasses our ability, the students' abilities to use and impart and exchange information and experience ideas and explore the world around them, and to understand and effectively engage in our world of media. Another competency is creative and critical thinking, and this includes specific thinking skills as well as habits of the mind and metacognitive awareness. This is a beautiful fit. These two, all of them, are beautiful fits with inquiry. The third competency is positive personal awareness and social responsibility. And this is a set of abilities that relate to the student's identity in the world, both as individuals and as members of their community and society. So the personal and social competency encompasses their abilities to thrive as an individual, to understand and care about themselves and others, and to find their purpose and achieve their purpose in the world. And like I said, I think the redesigned curriculum offers me hope and invites me to use inquiry-based learning in my classroom. Through an inquiry-based learning approach, teachers have the opportunity to nurture their students' curiosity and their ability to be fully engaged learners throughout their lives. We should be letting kids play and uncover and discover when they're little and when they're big too, right through into high school. We should be letting kids explore and engage and investigate and connect and, like I said, uncover and discover. And of course it takes time and energy to do this, but it is worth it. Remember how you felt as a child, or even how you feel now as an adult when you have a question or take a risk and try something new and interact and engage, and then you discover something and you have like a, whoa, oh, I get it, aha, one of those moments. That's what inquiry learning is. So, what is inquiry-based learning? Well, it's defined really well by the folks at Galileo.org, which is a recommended resource at the end of the presentation for you. As stated by the folks at Galileo.org, inquiry is a dynamic process. It's a shifting, changing process of being open to wonder and puzzlement and dwelling with questions and coming to know and understand the world. They say it is a stance that pervades all aspects of life and is essential to the way in which knowledge is created. Inquiry is based on the belief that understanding is constructed in the process of people working and conversing together as they pose and solve problems, make discoveries, and then rigorously test the discoveries that arise in the course of a shared activity. It's a study into a worthy question, issue, problem, or idea. It is authentic, real work that someone in the community might actually tackle. It's the type of work that those working in the disciplines actually undertake to create or build knowledge. It involves serious engagement and investigation and the active creation and testing of new knowledge. So in order for inquiry to be authentic, it needs these ingredients. It needs to be something that an adult at work or in the community might actually tackle: the question, the problem, the issue, the exploration being taken up. It needs to matter. So it begins with a real-life issue or topic that provides opportunities to create or produce something that contributes to the world's knowledge. It needs to have academic rigor. And by this it means it should lead the students to build knowledge that leads to deep understanding. It provides students with multiple flexible ways to approach the problem, issue, or question under study. And it encourages the students to develop habits of mind that encourage them to ask questions. Ask for evidence. How do we know what we know? Not just accept it because our teacher told us that's how it is or that's what it means. It encourages them to think of viewpoint. Who's speaking? Who wrote this? Where's this information coming from? They look at patterns and connections. What causes what? They make suppositions or theorize, like how might things have worked differently if? And they are able to answer why it matters that they're studying this. Who cares? Why do we need to know this? Assessment. Lots of people worry about assessment with inquiry, but I love how freeing assessment can be in inquiry. Assessment of inquiry is ongoing. I personally love to use the iPad or my phone and shoot videos or take pictures or do voice recordings in the moment and create a whole data bank of assessment from the beginning of an inquiry to the end. So it's woven into the design of the inquiry study, and you're constantly giving timely descriptive feedback that you can assess in a range of different methods, including peer and self-assessment. And the assessment is for learning more than it is of learning. So it guides the student's learning and the teacher's instructional planning. It provides opportunities for students to reflect on what they've been learning, and they create the criteria with you, and it helps them to steer their learning, to establish their next steps and to develop effective learning strategies. Life beyond the school. Woohoo! Inquiry should require students to address questions that are relevant to stuff in the curriculum, but are relevant to real life stuff happening in the world, whether it be in their home or their community or a local region or globally. So it asks them to gain skills and use competencies that are needed in the real world, like teamwork and problem solving and communicating and decision making and project management. And to get out into the community and connect beyond the walls of the school. We're all being asked to integrate technology as part of the redesigned curriculum as well. Well, inquiry involves and requires the use of digital technologies throughout the process. So we use these technologies in a purposeful manner, whether it be for taking photos or videos or researching or sharing information out to the world. When we use the technology, we're using it because it's essential to accomplishing the task. Kids, through inquiry, figure out which technology is most appropriate for what they need to get done, whether it's to share a decision, make a decision or share information or solve problems or to communicate to various audiences. Basically, Inquiry makes really great use of digital resources. The title for this webinar is Environmental Inquiry-Based Learning. Well, guess what? Inquiry encourages and supports active exploration. So whether you're engaged in environmental education, outdoor education, place-based education, or you're looking for ways to incorporate Aboriginal ways of knowing and Indigenous perspectives, Inquiry requires students to spend significant amounts of time out of the school building, engaging with their community and with their environment, whether that be going on a field trip or doing regular field work, creating designs and having to go to places to study how things were designed and come back to the classroom and do a bit of a lab, interviewing people within the community, building things. So with Inquiry, you need to engage in real, authentic investigations and actively explore outside of the building. Connecting with expertise. Well, while you're outside of the building, or you can invite them in, Inquiry is awesome because it grows the number of experts in the classroom, so to speak. Through Inquiry, students interact with adults who have the relevant expertise and experience, and they do this in a variety of situations. Authentic inquiry should involve the students getting to know at least one other adult other than their teacher, and the tasks should be designed in collaboration with experts, either directly, person to person, or indirectly by making a phone call or sending an email or social media, Skype. And also it requires adults to collaborate with each other and to work to be modeling how we collaborate, how we solve problems ourselves. And then they're encouraged to engage in what's called elaborated communication, but basically that means rich communication. So they have lots of opportunities through Inquiry, through the process, to support, challenge, and respond to each other's ideas as they figure out how to reach a common understanding. And they figure this out through small and large group discussions, and they can choose forms of expression to share their understandings. It doesn't have to be only oral communication or only written communication. There's a multitude of options. So those are the ingredients you see on the screen there for authentic inquiry. Now, there are always misconceptions. So misconception alert. Inquiry-based learning, it's not the same as project-based learning. As you can see on this chart, it can involve projects, but it's not just doing a project and then moving on, and then you're done. So it's not to be thought of in terms of isolated projects that you take up occasionally. It's not a method that you have to follow this like pre-formulated script where the teacher lets go of all control and runs around the room frantically helping each student on their individual inquiry journey. It's not something that only works with one subject, and it's not something that's so hard that you'll never cover all of the curriculum. These are all misconceptions. So where do you begin? What would your classroom look like if you were bringing inquiry-based learning to life? Well, you begin where the elders of the First Peoples began. Through inquiry-based learning, you follow the Aboriginal ways of knowing. You can see this graphic illustrates the Aboriginal ways of knowing in the circles. Excuse me. I want you to notice it's circular and that it's recursive, that it goes round and round. And I also want you to notice that the concepts or processes and activities connect with lines across the center of the circle. This is the exact same for inquiry. So this graphic represents in its simplest form the inquiry process. Now what's missing in this graphic are all the lines that run across the circle connecting one step to another. Those lines do appear once you begin your inquiry, and that whole center of that circle is crisscrossed with lines connecting creation to reflection, to investigation, back to discussion, back to investigation, back to creation. It gets messy. Inquiry always begins with an essential question designed either by you, the teacher, or you and the students, or just the students. When you're beginning inquiry, I would recommend that you, the teacher, create the essential question. This is the most important step to launching a successful, rich inquiry. You might be wondering what an essential question is and how to come up with one. I know I was when I began inquiry. So an essential question is an open-ended question, one that's typically not going to have a single, final, correct answer. The question begins with a desire to discover something. So they're inspired by a genuine curiosity about real-world experiences. A question or a problem comes into focus, and you start to figure out how to word it exactly, and some real-world examples of essential questions might be, why does the moon change shape? Or where do chickens come from, and how does an egg work? Or I wonder what makes a poem poetry. So essential questions are thought-provoking, they're intellectually engaging, they often lead to conversations and debates, and there isn't just one answer. And so because of that, it immediately engages students in higher order thinking like analysis and evaluation and prediction. It can't just be answered by looking up the answer in a book and just remembering everything. And it always requires support and justification. As I mentioned, I think if you're new to inquiry, the teacher should develop the open-ended question or provocation. And then as you get comfortable, you move into developing the question with your students. And then sometimes you might get to a point where you might have an amazing class that you can see is quite capable of coming up with their own independent inquiries. So you begin with the question, the asking, and the next step is investigating or researching. And this is where you take that impulse of curiosity and you put it into action through the investigation process. So at this stage, the students begin to gather information. They use their resources, they study, they craft an experiment, they observe, they interview, the list goes on. They might come up with asking the question in a slightly differently worded way, or try a strategy and come back and that didn't work and plunge down a new path. And the information gathering stage becomes a really self-motivated process that is really owned by the students. And again, I'm a type A, so I like control and knowing that it's going to work. And I like to tell people that teachers know their students, and you can anticipate where things are going to be heading, what discoveries they're going to be making or questions they might come to, and what skills they're going to need to be successful investigators. So this is where I say don't imagine just like letting go of control and guiding them on their, whoa, I'm curious about all these things. The teacher can still be guiding the process. And so as they're investigating, they're making connections, they're communicating with each other, they're building on their prior knowledge, they're creating new knowledge, and that's the next step, is the creating, where they're taking that prior knowledge and as they gather information in the investigation, their ideas start to merge and they start to make connections and they start making meaning. And that's the creative spark that forms this new knowledge, these aha moments. So the students start to undertake the creative task of shaping these new ideas, these new thoughts and theories, and they're offered the opportunity to consider a variety of ways to represent their learning and to share it. And through their creations, they're asked to articulate connections that they've made between what they knew before and what they've now discovered. And through this, they might be coming up with new questions that need to be considered. And in the creative stage, the students are encouraged to find ways to take action and to apply this new knowledge to life outside of the school building. The next step after creating is discussion. At this point, this is where students share their ideas with each other and ask each other about their own experiences and investigation. And this knowledge sharing is a community process of constructing knowledge. And the students start to come to a common understanding of their investigation. So they compare notes and they discuss theories and conclusions and they share their experiences. Knowledge building circles are an excellent method to have discussions with your students. I've got a short video clip of a knowledge building circle, and in this video you'll notice that the role of the teacher is much different within the inquiry process. So the teacher is really acting as a facilitator or a guide. So here is the video clip. Is my volume up too?
We have so much information about why does water evaporate and how does water go into clouds and how does it rain. Tomorrow we're going to make some rise above notes about those questions. But today I thought there was some neat question that not a lot of people have picked up on that maybe because they're so kind of new. So here's the one I'm helping today. I think it's from you, Anna. Why is there So a knowledge building circle is a time when the whole class gets together and sits in a circle. The teacher is in the circle as one of the members of the group. And the class is considering a question, usually that everybody or most people are interested in. And it's a time for children not only to share what they know, but also to share what they think. So these conceptions come out because the children are theorizing and they're building onto each other's ideas. So it's a collaborative approach to building knowledge together rather than children working on their own and giving something to the teacher. So it really is a group process. And sometimes you do come to an understanding within a knowledge building circle, but more often it's a sharing of ideas where knowledge is improved, but you're never quite there. There's always more to learn, and we want kids to know that there's always read how many days a person could go without water. Has anyone ever read that? How many days could you live?
Maybe 1 day.
Well, we could make guesses, but I'm wondering if anyone... Yeah, we should look that up. Let's not talk about that just now, but let's keep looking at that in one of our water books. I wonder how many days to live without water. So I guess when I have a knowledge building circle, I'm really interested in what the children are thinking. And it's important that I'm not seen as the authority and that I'm not going to be every time a child speaks saying that's right or that's wrong. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So I have to be really careful to be quite neutral about my responses, because if I'm not, children are going to take a risk because they're going to think it's just a game of guessing what's in my head. And that's not what knowledge building or a part of this teaching is about. So I'm really interested to find out what the children know, also what they think, even if it's a misconception. And so I wouldn't necessarily correct that misconception right away, but I would listen and to build on, and hopefully within even that knowledge building circle, a misconception could be dealt with and we could actually advance our understanding. Well, I think I'm looking for the quality of the ideas the children have, so the thought they're bringing to the ideas that they're giving. If they're able to follow the thread of the conversation, stay on topic, listen to others, and perhaps build an idea on or present a different idea. Can they do that in a nice way without hurting someone's feelings? Are they asking good questions? Connecting to, we've done experiments, we've gone on a trip. Can they make connections? Like when we did this experiment, we learned this, and now I think this. So I'm looking not just for what they say today, but how it connects to all the other work that we've been doing.
The plants need water to grow, and the people who are homeless on the streets, they need water.
There was a question, Jen Tag typed up in the chat box of is this like where you kind of have your head down and you're just documenting the student responses? And just like the teacher mentioned in the video, that yeah, this is in knowledge building circles, you're trying to be an equal with those students. You're modeling that you're a learner too, and that you're learning from their contributions, and that there's a shared understanding and a deepening of knowledge happening as a group. And what's really, what I have found very interesting through knowledge building circles is I'm often surprised by the voices that I hear that I don't normally hear if it's just a, you know, raise your hand and answer this question type of scenario. And the students, by having me type as they're giving their answers, it's been my observation that they feel their answers matter. I'm writing them down. They matter enough that I'm listening and writing them down, and I can project what I'm typing on my laptop onto the smartboard in the room, and so it's like a real-time documentation of the inquiry. And it's nice for my assessment practices. I can look back, just like she said, and look at the quality of thoughts that are being offered, the questions that are being asked, whose voice is heard often, whose voice isn't. So anyways, knowledge building circles are a great way to spark discussion in your classroom through inquiry. And then finally we move to reflection. That's the next step in the process. So by taking the time to take inventory on the journey, the inquiry journey, the students are inevitably going to come to some conclusions and have new questions and new ideas. So basically this step consists in taking the time to look back, to think again about the initial essential question that you asked, and to take a look at the path you took through investigating, and then to look at the actual conclusions. And maybe along that journey, along that reflection, some new decisions will be made or new questions will be asked. Excuse me. And through this process, students are building their own knowledge, and you know, typically new questions are asked, and so the circle of inquiry can continue. And if they're practicing this process, we're encouraging them to be lifelong learners and to take those new questions they have and to keep investigating, and then creating, and then discussing, and then reflecting. So I want you to know it's not a rigid or fixed model that has to be followed exactly at all times. It's not. I truly believe that teaching is an art form. It always has and it always will be. And the richest, most beautiful art is not created by painting by numbers. It's created by following your instincts, by investing yourself and committing to the process. And going back to the Aboriginal ways of knowing graphic, a true inquiry will have lines constantly crossing the circle. The students might move back and forth between questioning and researching many times before they move on to the creating phase of the process. It is messy, but it works. It can work. It does work. Now I realize that this sounds like a lot, and like me, when I was first introduced to the idea of inquiry-based learning, you might be feeling overwhelmed and worried about how the heck to actually do this. So don't worry, you can ease into inquiry. You don't have to abandon everything you know and do now in your classroom. There's 4 levels of inquiry. Naturally, of course, the level of inquiry that you're going to embark upon is going to depend on your ability and the ability of the class that you have, and on the topics that you want to take up through inquiry. So you can basically choose between these 4 levels. Level 1, confirmation, basically it confirms something that you already know. So it might be an experiment like where you already know plants need water to survive, but you do an experiment that confirms that. Level 2, a structured inquiry. This approach is where the teacher mainly directs the inquiry. They provide the question to be investigated, and then they give step-by-step instructions that are going to help the students to discover the answers. And I want to stress that this level of inquiry is very, very, very important because it enables the students to gradually develop the skills that are needed to conduct a guided or open inquiry. If students have never experienced inquiry before, you definitely shouldn't just do a guided or open inquiry, a level 3 or level 4 inquiry, because the kids won't have the skills that they need to be successful. Moving on, as you get practice with inquiry-based learning, you can move to guided inquiry, where generally the teacher still chooses the question, but the students take more responsibility for the direction of the inquiry and how they're going to investigate things. And then the teacher plays the role of the guide through the process for the students. They might pose some questions that help lead the kids to the right direction or to get back on track and focusing on the question that they're trying to answer. And then finally there's open inquiry, and this is where the students take the lead in establishing the question and the methods while the teacher takes on a supportive role. And it's very important that the students in open inquiry, they have the skills that you need for that higher order thinking, that they're able to ask the questions to redirect themselves and to be sure they're headed in the right direction with their inquiry. And you can merge any of these different levels together in the same inquiry. You could begin with a structured inquiry and then move into a guided inquiry. So I want to tell you, you can do it. Take the leap and use inquiry. I want to show you another short video clip that really inspired me and might take all my talking and give you a visual and a real-life example of inquiry to think about.
qu'est-ce que vous aimeriez régler comme problème? Qu'est-ce que vous aimeriez qui change dans votre communauté?
On diminue le vandalisme dans les marques.
Bon, je cherche des informations sur le problème. Donc, tu dois avoir des documents sur le vandalisme, des dossiers de presse, des interviews.
Que faites-vous dans votre programme pour aider la ville face au vandalisme? Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du vandalisme dans la ville de Marseille?
On va sortir les solutions qu'on a trouvées dans notre document des 8 étapes.
C'est sûr, je trouve. Probablement, ça va être les devants de parc.
Ok, merci.
On vous invite à vous rassembler à la mairie de Marqueville.
Bonjour, chers partenaires et chers citoyens. Une de nos pistes de solution est de faire un mode d'expression à cause du manque d'expression des jeunes.
Moi, je trouve ça super beau de vous voir aller. Fait que, ben, moi, je vous donne un mur.
Ma soeur, elle arrive le soir, puis elle me dit j'ai passé une belle journée parce que j'étais avec M. Dominique puis toute cette gang-là. C'était pognés ensemble, puis ben, vous allez aller loin.
Sorry, I think that video came through a little choppy for you, but hopefully you could get the idea that the teacher began just by saying to the kids, what do you care about? What matters to you? What's a problem you want to solve here in our community? And they decided as a group to focus on vandalism in their community. And by exploring that, it took them outside of the walls of their classroom. They engaged with town council, they engaged with local business people, and did a bunch of research into why vandalism happens, where it's happening most in their community, and in the end, they made a real difference in their community and had blank walls, basically freestanding walls in the community park installed where people were invited to come and express themselves on these walls. Something really doesn't sound like much, but I would invite you to watch the National Film Board's, that's just a trailer of the video. It's called Hope Builders. It's an hour-and-a-half long documentary on this teacher's journey with inquiry-based learning and his class, and it's truly inspiring. Like I said, you can do this, and while you're at it, you can nail BC's redesign curriculum. So BC's curriculum on their website, it says capturing the energy. We all know how passionate kids can get about something that interests them, whether it's dinosaurs, soccer, or music. The BC government calls this personalized learning. Personally, I call it inquiry-based learning. Whatever you decide to call it, basically they're saying they want us to tap into the students' passions and their natural curiosities. And I just invite you to imagine what's possible if we can actually capture that energy and focus from those passions and connect them to our classroom learning, whether it's computers, video games, hockey, art. Passion is a huge intrinsic motivator that we can be tapping into, and the BC Redesign curriculum invites us to do so. By practicing inquiry-based learning, you can weave and bring to life the Aboriginal ways of knowing and Indigenous perspectives into your class's learning experiences. Aboriginal ways of knowing are alive and well within a thriving inquiry-based learning community. You can see it's about engagement, sharing, moving forward, respect. I'll just do a little zoom in on the redesigned curriculum here. It states that Aboriginal perspectives will also influence assessment practices. So as the curriculum content embeds Aboriginal knowledge and worldviews, how we assess students will naturally include the same understandings and knowledge. And I say, woohoo, guess what? A rich and rigorous inquiry-based learning experience should most definitely involve not just assessing the memorization or the standardization, but rather use a multitude of assessment tools that truly reflect the student's skills and their competencies. And let me ask you this. How many of you struggle with student behaviors in your classroom? Well, when you're practicing inquiry-based learning, you'll be very pleased with the decrease in student behaviors that you experience and deal with day in and day out. Dr. Stuart Shanker of York University states that, quote, just about everywhere you turn these days, you come across someone talking about the importance of enhancing children's ability to self-regulate. This is because of a growing number of studies showing that self-regulation lays a foundation for a child's long-term physical, psychological, behavioral, and educational well-being. Some people view inquiry as being like or feeling like chaos in the classroom, and that scares them, and that's why they don't want to go there. Yes, it might be a bit more chaotic than a kind of transmission-style classroom. It's different from what we are accustomed to, where most students are engaged in working on the same or very similar tasks. In inquiry, there might be a lot of different questions being explored. However, when the kids are engaged in learning, inquiry allows for them to have, for their legitimate desire for information and skill to be honored, skill development to be honored, and the classroom environment is focused. So it might seem chaotic, but it's focused chaos. The students are actively experimenting, problem solving, and negotiating. And when they're engaged in something they really care about and are interested in, you notice a persistence that we may not normally see in kids. And I can say that I've lived this, and it's amazing. When I'm engaged in inquiry-based learning, student behaviors or challenging student behaviors seem to decrease. I'm nearing the end here. So lastly is with inquiry, environmental, outdoor, and place-based education is really good friends with inquiry learning. I recently attended a two-day Inquiry Institute hosted by CBEAN Natural Curiosity and Learning for a Sustainable Future. As Duncan mentioned, I helped to facilitate it. And Natural Curiosity is an organization that has an excellent resource for environmental inquiry. And they defined environmental inquiry to be an overarching approach to environmental education that combines inquiry-based learning, hands-on experiential learning, interdisciplinary learning, and stewardship in a dynamic pedagogical framework. And they really inspired me. They have this transformative vision for education that seeks to develop not only skilled and knowledgeable students, but also environmentally and socially conscious world citizens who have a love of learning. I would argue from these quotes from the BC Redesign Curriculum on this Zoom in that BC is moving towards and supporting environmental, outdoor, and place-based education. And I encourage you and your colleagues who you might be able to inspire as well, let's do this through inquiry. Last but not least, I'd like to leave you with some recommended resources. We all know how many hours we can spend Googling something these days. If you Google inquiry-based learning, you get millions of hits. Anyways, I have a top four recommendations for you if you're interested in knowing more about environmental inquiry-based learning. So there's Galileo.org, which is an organization based in Calgary, and they would be one of my very top recommendations as a resource. They have international experience working with inquiry, and their website is full of resources, whether it be assessment tools, whether it be help developing an essential question, whether it be examples of inquiries that they have done in partnership with teachers in different schools throughout Canada and throughout the world. To the right, Natural Curiosity. They're an excellent organization. They're the one that I just mentioned, who are working through the lens of environmental inquiry. And this brown graphic is the cover to a teacher resource that is worth getting your hands on. And then below there's Learning for a Sustainable Future. Their website has an excellent resource called Connecting the Dots, which is a free downloadable resource that I'd highly recommend looking at. And there are tons of links on their website to great information. And then finally, Seabean. For us in the Columbia Basin, there's all sorts of information and resources on Seabean that will support you with environmental inquiry-based learning. So I will conclude with this. We live in a world that doesn't really encourage a lot of risk-taking. I want you to imagine actually encouraging your students and enabling them to take some risks through inquiry-based learning. Rather than forcing them to sit still and listen in class, let's let them get outside and spread their wings and fly. This shouldn't terrify us. This is the way that we have developed to be, and that we should encourage children to be. By doing this, we can bring ourselves as teachers and the students fulfillment, and we can help ourselves as teachers and the students to become happy, growing, lifelong, learning human beings. And I believe that inquiry-based learning can support the children of today and equip them well with the tools and skills necessary for them to be the leaders of tomorrow. If we allow natural curiosity to grow in childhood, then children and teenagers will be overflowing with a desire to learn and open doors to discovery. And to me, that's not scary, that's thrilling. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you found this to be a valuable use of your time. Like I said before, I'd be interested in your feedback and any questions or comments or ideas you have for me. Again, thank you.
So I'll just jump in here. Yeah, thanks so much, Tara. And looks like we're run out of time. But if you have any questions, I'll just post it here. But you can send them to info@seabean.org, and we'll make sure that Tara gets them. And there's lots of great examples of inquiry out there. And so it'd be lovely to start to share those across the region, and we're looking at ways to do that. And I know at the upcoming School District 5 and 6 Day, there is an inquiry session, as well as the Inquiry Institute taking place in Nelson in a few weeks. So lots more opportunities to share and collaborate. But this resource will be available on our website after, and I just encourage everybody to join us for our next and final webinar of this year with Ali Candy next Thursday, same time, same place. And big thanks to Tara for sharing some of her knowledge and ideas, and again, I'm sure she'd be happy to connect with you in person after and discuss your ideas of inquiry. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to connecting with you either next week or very soon in person. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday evening.